If you had to survive off your food storage, it might keep you alive, but would it keep you healthy? I really wanted to narrow this down to the one best, healthiest grain. Actually, years and years ago when my grandmother worked in a factory, she said the only difference between the two cans was the label they put on the can. This actually has the highest antioxidant content of any oil. Hey guys, it's Jamerrill with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Today I have 10 of the healthiest foods you can stock in your prepper pantry. One of the biggest complaints we hear when we're talking about long-term food storage and shelf-stable meals is about the nutrition of the food, or rather the lack thereof. When we think about shelf-stable foods with a long shelf life, some of the things that come to mind are things like Spam and canned soups, and things like that are high in things like sodium and preservatives and lacking in other nutrition. Not to mention, some people have become even more concerned lately with some of the changes in the food labeling laws and some of the things that are now being added to our food labels as a result. Suffice to say, a lot of people are looking long and hard at the foods they stock in their prepper pantry, and with good reason. If we find ourselves in a long-term grid down emergency situation, staying strong and healthy is going to be paramount to survival, and nutrition plays a huge role in that. With that in mind, I have put together my list of 10 of the healthiest foods you can stock in your food storage. Let's go. First on my list is lentils. We always hear about beans when we hear about prepper food, the ubiquitous beans and rice classic prepper combination. But I think an even better choice for your prepper pantry is lentils. Lentils have all the nutritional benefits and long shelf life of beans, but they have one distinct advantage in terms of prepping an emergency food. And that is that they cook up much more quickly than beans, which is going to help conserve fuel, and they don't require soaking before cooking, which helps conserve water. In the past, lentils were referred to as poor man's meat because they're a great source of protein and iron, and they still make a great stand-in for meat today. They actually have more protein and more fiber than beans and are easier to digest, which could also prove very important in a time of crisis. They also contain less of the compounds that reduce the bioavailability of the nutrients, meaning our bodies are able to absorb and use more of the nutrients in lentils than in beans. They're also a good source of vitamin A, thiamine, folate, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin K, and vitamin E. And I actually cut out some of the harder to pronounce nutrients from that list, so these things really are packed with nutrition. They contain all kinds of phytonutrients with anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and anti-cancer effects. They're high in prebiotic, resistant starches, so they're actually great for your gut health. There's all kinds of ways you can use lentils. They can be used in soups, they can be used in salads, they can be sprouted for a little fresh green crunch in your apocalypse diet. They can be used as a substitute for ground meat, added into sauces, made into a meatloaf or a burger patty, either as a substitute for meat or to stretch a small amount of meat that you have and make it go further. I have a wicked good recipe for lentil soup that is so good, and I do think I have that in a video somewhere on the channel, so I will try to link that down below for you in case you're looking for a good recipe to learn to enjoy lentils. And you can also get instant lentils, the same way you can get instant beans. I talk about those all the time. These are just lentils that have been cooked and then dehydrated. You can buy them or you can make them yourself. So they cook up even more quickly. But like I mentioned, because lentils cook so quickly in general, and the instant type is going to cost a little bit more unless you're making them yourself, I only get these to use in my meals in a jar. But if you do meals in a jar or you make your own backpacking meals, then these would be great to have on hand. I'll put my source for the instant lentils down in the description box. I find the best price for regular brown lentils like these for me is usually Walmart or Dollar Tree. And for all of my other lentils, like these red lentils, I usually go to Azure Standard because they have really great prices and an amazing selection. I've seen lentils there, varieties of lentils that I've never seen anywhere else. Next up, we have a couple of really true superfoods, and that's really the name of the game here. We want to pack as many nutrients as possible into a small selection of food. First, back here I have chia seed. It's also in this bag back here. Chia seeds are an amazing food source. They're loaded with fiber, antioxidants, minerals, and omega-3 fatty acids. Just 2 tablespoons of chia seeds has almost 10 grams of fiber. If you're a person who pays attention to nutrition, then you realize just how impressive that is. They also have a good amount of protein, healthy fatty acids, calcium, magnesium, iron, phosphorus, zinc, and B vitamins. The antioxidants in chia seed include quercetin, along with many others that I'm not as familiar with. And not only are the antioxidants good for us when we eat this food, but they also help keep the chia seed itself from going rancid. They protect the chia seed just like they protect us. I have chia seed that I've had in my home for quite a long time, and I've never had issues with it going bad, because that's always something that we have to factor in when we're looking at whether something is a good fit for emergency food storage. Chia seeds are easy to use. My favorite way to eat them is in a chia pudding, and I have made some shelf-stable mini chia pudding jar meals with just chia seeds, coconut milk powder, honey powder, and freeze-dried fruit or berries. All you have to do is add water, let them set for a little bit, and you have a delicious, nutritious breakfast or snack without any cooking. Because of the way that chia seeds absorb water and sort of gel and thicken, they make a good egg substitute, and you can also use them to make jams and thicken sauces and all sorts of things like that. You can also sprinkle them over just about anything: oatmeal, cereal, baked goods. If they're not soaked, they're kind of like a little poppy seed. So I purchased these chia seed from Azure Standard. I find that they have really great quality and one of the lowest prices that I've been able to find. And I love that I can buy in bulk. Next up, this bottle right here contains spirulina. This is another superfood due to the massive amount of nutrients that it packs into a very small amount of food. Spirulina is a blue-green algae, so it is a vegetable food source. It's used medicinally for a variety of things, including ADHD, allergies, diabetes, blood pressure, stress, fatigue, anxiety, and depression. It's an amazing source of protein, contains B vitamins, antioxidants. A tablespoon of spirulina has more calcium than a glass of milk. It's also a great detoxifier. It helps to cleanse your blood and remove things like arsenic, heavy metals, and radiation from your body. It contains high amounts of antioxidants and has anti-inflammatory properties. It should be avoided by people with PKU or autoimmune diseases, as it can stimulate the immune system, but that's a good thing for the rest of us. You can use it by mixing it into drinks, oatmeal, smoothies, and things like that. It would even be a great addition to a chia pudding and would give it a beautiful color. Now I'm thinking this is probably a good time to throw in the fact that I am not a doctor, I am not a nutritionist. It provides MCTs, which are medium chain triglycerides. Lentils are high in zinc and selenium, and they're a good... Look at that selenium. What can I say about that? This is just things that I've learned and picked up throughout my years of research and personal interest in nutrition. So I definitely need to remind you that you should always check with your own doctor and do your own research before you make any decisions about health and nutrition. You know what they say, don't take health advice from random strangers on the internet. Although at this point, I'd like to think to a lot of you, I'm not just a random stranger, because a lot of you have been here with us through thick and thin, and I definitely don't feel like we're strangers. But my main purpose here is to get your mind just moving in the direction of looking at your food storage and trying to incorporate some more healthful foods into it if that's necessary. And honestly, most of what we're talking about here is food, not medicine. Maybe food as medicine, but you get my point. I'm not a nutritionist, I just play one on TV. Next on the list is nuts and nut butters. Specifically, I have here peanut butter, and that's for several reasons. First of all, it's something that's accessible to everyone and relatively affordable. And secondly, it has a pretty good shelf life compared to other foods in this category. Case in point, this jar of peanut butter right now, this is the one that's currently we're using in our cupboard. And the best by date on this is September 28th, 2019. And it's still perfectly fine. It's not rancid. There's nothing wrong with it. We're using it. It tastes just like it should. We have friends and family who know I'm not afraid of best by dates. And like I have said on the channel before, one way to build your prepper pantry if you have very little money is to take anything you can get for free and work it in somewhere. So we have family and friends who aren't comfortable eating food that's past its dates, or sometimes they're cleaning out their pantry for like some other reason, like maybe they've changed their eating habits or they just had a medical condition that they were diagnosed with, that they have to change their way of eating, something like that. And then they know I'll take what they're getting rid of and put it to use, because a lot of times even food pantries won't take food that's out of date. So I take it gladly and work it into our rotation so that we have things like this that are technically expired, and I'm here to tell you it's fine. If things have gone bad, you'll know it, your nose will tell you. And nuts don't always store a really long time because of the oils in them. They can become rancid, but you don't necessarily need things that will store a very long time. Not every prepper pantry item has to have a 25-year shelf life. If you're following the rule of store what you eat and eat what you store, and you're rotating through your preps, you don't necessarily need 25-year storage. If you have something that will keep for 6 months, then theoretically you can stock a 6-month supply of it, as long as you're regularly eating from and rotating your supply. Likewise, if something will keep for a year, then you can theoretically store a year's supply. And I can't think of a single nut that would not keep for at least 6 months, and a 6-month supply of nuts is a pretty good amount. Nuts and peanut butter are full of protein, fiber, vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats. They can help keep you feeling full longer, which could become very important if we were living off of our food storage. Each type of nut has a different specific health benefits and different nutrient profiles. So really just pick your favorites and the ones that you have the best luck with long-term storage or longer-term storage. I know I love macadamia nuts, but that's one that I've had the worst luck with storing. They go rancid pretty quickly. But like I said, I can keep at least usually 6 months worth around and just make sure I'm rotating. Nuts can be stored a lot longer if you can keep them in the freezer, but remember, we're not relying on our freezer for any of our emergency food storage because we want to focus on shelf-stable foods for obvious reasons. But if you do have the freezer space, you can go ahead and throw your nuts in there to extend their life. Just don't count on it in an emergency. Next, we've got canned foods, but not just any canned foods, specific ones that stand out above the rest nutritionally. One of these is coconut milk. Coconut milk can stand in for dairy milk. It's packed with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and electrolytes. It does provide MCTs, which is medium chain triglycerides, which is a type of fat that's really good for your brain, your cholesterol levels, and detoxification. It contains compounds that are anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and antifungal. It can be added to a lot of dishes, especially Asian dishes, which I love. So it's a great thing to have in the pantry. Next, I have canned fish. Specifically, I have chosen canned salmon here. Salmon is a very healthy choice that I think appeals to a lot of people, more than some of the other choices available. I mean, if you don't like fish, then you don't like fish, and obviously this wouldn't be a good choice for your preps, unless you can find a way to enjoy it. But canned salmon can be added to pasta dishes, and it can be made into salmon patties, salmon loaf, or just into like a sandwich filling. There's lots of things you can do with canned salmon. It contains a lot of key nutrients, including protein, calcium, vitamins B and D, omega-3s for your brain and heart health, and this has less mercury contamination than tuna, so that's another reason I chose this one. And I think it's just probably more appealing to more people than other canned fish options like sardines and mackerel. After the salmon, I've got a few vegetables here, and I chose specific ones that are a little more nutrient dense than others. I think a part of the reason that canned vegetables get a bad rap sometimes is because the most common canned vegetables that we eat, the ones we usually think of right away, are not exactly nutritional powerhouses of vegetables. Peas, corn, and green beans, right? I mean, they're not all bad, but we can do better. On principle, canned vegetables aren't bad. They're definitely preferable to no vegetables. And what's in those cans really is no different than what would be in our own home canned vegetables. Vegetables, water, and a little bit of salt for flavor. The salt isn't necessary for preservation, so you can buy canned vegetables with no salt added as well, if that's part of your concern. But do keep in mind that salt or sodium is something that our bodies need. It's a necessary nutrient for life and survival. So while we tend to think of it in a negative light because our modern diet tends to be too high in sodium, it's really not as bad as it's made out to be. But regardless, there are some canned vegetables that pack more of a nutritional punch than others. Vegetables like spinach and squash and beets. Spinach is a nutritious leafy green vegetable that's high in calcium, iron, potassium, and fiber. Beets are high in folate. They contain a compound called betalain, which is a powerful antioxidant. Beets are great for helping regulate blood pressure. And in times when medical help may not be available, we want all the help from food that we can get. Canned squash is another nutritional powerhouse. What I happen to have here is pumpkin, but it's basically the same thing, nutritionally especially. Years and years ago when my grandmother worked in a factory where they canned the squash and the pumpkin, she said the only difference between the two cans was the label they put on the can. But you can get canned butternut squash. I found a beautiful organic canned butternut squash at Azure Standard. I'll put a link for that down in the description box. But canned squash is high in vitamin A and beta carotene. It provides iron, vitamin C, and a whole bunch of fiber, which is a good thing for keeping you regular, among other things. You can use canned squash as a side dish to make soup or a sauce for pasta, and you can even make desserts, stir some into oatmeal or sweet rice. A good substitute if you can't find the squash is canned carrots. Being an orange vegetable, it's going to have a lot of the same nutrients as the squash. I just don't particularly care for canned carrots, so I would rather have the squash, but I do keep canned carrots to use in shelf-stable recipes, meals in a bag, and things like that. And you could blend the carrots up and use them much the same way that you use the squash if you wanted. I also have canned tomatoes. I guess this is actually a fruit, not a vegetable, but you know what I mean. Canned tomatoes and tomato products, which would also include things like spaghetti sauce and salsa. These are packed with essential nutrients, and they're a good source of vitamins A, C, and E, as well as minerals like potassium and folate. But another reason that I chose the tomatoes is because They're just such a good basic ingredient that you can use to make so many different dishes, different soups and different pasta dishes, casseroles. There's a lot of different foods you can make with the tomatoes, and they're healthy to boot. Tomatoes are a great source of lycopene, and they actually have more lycopene available to our bodies in the canned version of tomatoes than in fresh tomatoes. I like to buy the already seasoned and flavored ones when I can, because that's just one less thing that you need to add to your recipe. I mean, I usually still add some seasoning, but this cuts down on the seasonings that you have to add. Now, if you're able to get them, or if you have a home freeze dryer, the freeze-dried versions of things like spinach and squash are great options. The freeze drying process actually maintains a lot more nutrients than canning does, so the vegetables would be even healthier than canned vegetables. And honestly, the taste is also going to be a lot better, especially on like the spinach. Canned spinach can be a bit of an acquired taste, I think. And then you could have cubes of the squash rather than the puree if you had freeze-dried, so it just opens up more options. Freeze-dried vegetables also have a longer shelf life than canned, and you can get a wider variety of vegetables, like broccoli, for instance, which is another super nutritious vegetable that you're not going to find in a can. Now, the last veggie I have here is some roasted red peppers. Now, these are not technically canned because they're in a jar, but you can sometimes find them in a can. They're more typically in a jar. I did include these here with the canned vegetables. Peppers are a very nutritious vegetable, and this is a really great option to have in your prepper pantry. You can see they're super high in vitamins A and C. They've got some calcium, some iron, they've got fiber. They can be added to soups, sandwiches, pasta dishes. You can blend these up and add them to sauces and spreads. So these are a really nice option to have in your pantry for nutrition. If you're eating out of your food storage and you're relying on all canned vegetables, you're probably going to be like longing for something fresh. It's definitely a great idea to have garden seeds in your supplies, but that's not really what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about food that you have stored. And like I've talked about in other videos, this year was a real eye-opener for us when it comes to gardening, because we lost the majority of our garden to flooding in our area. So we realized you really need to make sure, I mean, we already knew this, but it was like a reminder of why we have to store food and not rely on our garden 100%. If that was our main food source, we would be in a really bad place right now. But one thing that you can have in your pantry that really would be like food and would give you fresh food any time of the year without needing a garden is seeds and supplies for sprouting and microgreens. I've got microgreen trays back here, sprouting lid, and seeds for both. Sprouts and microgreens can be grown easily indoors with very simple materials and just a matter of days worth of time invested. The basic difference between the two is really just the length of time they're allowed to grow. Sprouts and microgreens are both packed with nutrients. There is evidence that they actually have higher concentrations of the nutrients than the mature plant counterparts. So like broccoli sprouts have a higher concentration of all the good things that broccoli would have than the grown broccoli plant would have, and so on and so forth. The exact nutrition is going to depend on the type of seed that you're sprouting, but most varieties tend to be rich in potassium, iron, zinc, magnesium, and copper. They're also a great source of beneficial plant compounds like antioxidants, and there's just something different and irreplaceable about the crunch of fresh greenery in a world of shelf-stable foods. So definitely include these in your prepper pantry and learn how to grow them and get used to using them. Next up, eggs. Eggs are a nutritionally packed food. They're full of vitamins, vitamin A, all the B vitamins, D, E, and K, selenium, phosphorus and calcium for healthy bones and teeth, zinc for your immune system, folate, choline, lots of protein, and healthy fats. Eating eggs causes stable blood glucose and insulin response and suppresses hunger hormones so that you feel full longer. Egg protein has also been shown to decrease malnutrition and improve muscle health. That's all so important, and even more so during a sustained crisis. As preppers, we try very hard to be self-reliant. We do have ducks and chickens. This is one of our chicken eggs. That's a great way to always have eggs in your diet if you set it up sustainably. But because that's never a sure thing, we also keep a good supply of powdered eggs in our preps. These are awesome. They work in baking and recipes, and you can even cook them up as scrambled eggs. And I swear you would not even know they weren't fresh eggs. But do test them out, the ones that you get. Don't just buy them and stash them away without trying them, because there are definitely differences between brands. And I have heard from lots of people about certain brands they've tried that they would not say the same thing about. So like everything else in your pantry, rotate it, try it out, learn how to use it. You'll see a lot of these things that I have up here are getting kind of empty because these are things that we use in our everyday cooking. And I use these in meals in a jar and things like that. If you don't learn how to use them, they won't do you any good in an emergency. We all need a little bit of sweetness in our life and in our diet, and honey is a great source for that because in addition to providing that sweet flavor, which our bodies are actually hardwired to want, as well as energy from the calories it provides, it also provides antioxidants, polyphenols, and has antimicrobial properties and medicinal uses, such as using it for cough syrup, we do that, and wound care, all sorts of things. It's also a forever food, meaning you don't have to worry about it ever going bad. If you're going to store a sweetener, it might as well be one with all of these added benefits. Avocado oil. I included this because I really wanted to include avocados in this list of healthy foods, but unless you own a home freeze dryer, it would be just about impossible to include avocados in your food storage. But avocado oil will give you a lot of the same health benefits that you would get from an avocado, minus the fiber. Our bodies do need fats. Our brains need fats. Fats are actually very important for our body to help us absorb many other nutrients. Fats give us a more concentrated source of calories when food is scarce. Like salt, fat has kind of gotten a bad rap over the years due to the fact that people eat a diet too high in the wrong types of fats, because not all fats are created equal. Avocado oil is full of healthy fats and lutein, which is very important for our vision and our eye health. Some other healthy oils that you can store include olive oil, of course, coconut oil, and this is a brand new one to me. I just learned about this. This is red palm oil. Of course, I knew palm oil existed, but I did not know that it was so healthy. This actually has the highest antioxidant content of any oil. So definitely store some healthy oils in your prepper pantry. And then finally back here, I have some whole grains. I really wanted to narrow this down to the one best, healthiest grain. But I decided to talk about several that have different benefits for different reasons. I included wheat, whole wheat berries, because wheat is such a staple in so many of our diets. Everything from breads to pastas, most of us consume a whole lot of wheat products. Whole grain wheat does have about the highest protein content of any grain, and in its purest form, it still has so many health benefits that we usually don't get because we usually are eating processed flour and that's all been stripped out. Things like fiber, prebiotics that are usually stripped away when it's made into flour. If you store whole wheat berries and grind your own flour and use it within a few days, you're going to get a lot more nutrients out of it than you would buying the flour already ground from the store. And whole wheat berries that haven't been ground will store for a very long time under the right conditions, 25 to 30 years at least. Wheat is one of the most basic staples in a long-term pantry. It's a good idea to invest in a grain mill that can be operated manually, but even if you don't have the means to grind the wheat berries, they can also be cooked and eaten as a cooked grain, similar to rice or hot breakfast cereal. And they can also be sprouted. There are a few other grains here that I'm including that I think are great additions to our preps. And really, any of these grains could be ground into flour as well. Quinoa is a complete protein, which is rare in plant-based foods, and it also has a lot of fiber and minerals. It cooks very quickly, which we know is a big plus in an emergency, and it can also be used as a more nutritious substitute for rice. Amaranth, which I did not pull out, so I don't have that up here, but it's another really nutritious choice. 1 cup of cooked amaranth has 9 grams of protein and 5 grams of fiber. And it also has more than 4 times as much calcium as wheat. And it's also a good source of iron, magnesium, phosphorus, manganese, B vitamins, and vitamins C and E. It cooks quickly, which we know is important for our emergency food. And for me, a really important factor is that we were able to grow this grain easily in our own garden. And so the ability to be sustainable and to grow or produce our own is another quality I look for in the foods for our pantry. Don't forget about bulgur wheat. I think this is a largely overlooked grain, but it's one of my favorite options. Bulgur is another form of wheat. It's cracked wheat, and it is packed with fiber, B vitamins, and minerals. But what really makes it ideal for emergency food is that it can be prepared by just pouring boiling water over it and letting it sit. I have a salad recipe using bulgur that's one of my all-time favorite dishes, but it can also be used in pilafs and other dishes like that. And then, of course, oats. We don't want to forget about oats, whole grain oats, oatmeal. That is one of the healthiest grains out there on the planet. You can see that my container is just about empty because, like I said, we do use all this stuff. And I like to let my containers get all the way empty and then wash them before I refill them. Oats are a really great grain to have. Of course, that makes a really quick breakfast cereal that's going to keep you full a lot longer. It's got a lot of vitamins, minerals, fiber, all kinds of good stuff. We all know how healthy oatmeal is for us. It can be used as a binder and a filler and a recipe stretcher and a belly filler. And then one last thing, of course, it's always best to get our nutrition from the actual food, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra nutritional insurance. So having multivitamins that you store is a good idea. Store some extra, definitely make sure to rotate them so they don't lose their potency. And then if you do find yourself in a situation that's going to be lasting, for a while, then you can always take these every other day, every third day, twice a week. It'll still help prevent deficiencies, and you'll be able to stretch them out a little bit longer. The biggest criteria for me looking at these foods is that they're very nutrient dense. We're all limited to some degree with our food storage by money and by space. So by selecting foods that really pack in the most nutrition, we can meet our needs in the smallest possible footprint. And what's great is that many or most of these foods are very inexpensive. Most of these foods are pretty commonly and easily available at your regular grocery store. In fact, a lot of these you can even purchase at a Dollar Tree. And I've seen plenty of these foods given out by food banks, things like lentils, canned salmon, peanut butter, and canned veggies. So hopefully this can be achievable even by people with very limited resources. If you're looking for good, trustworthy sources for really clean and nutritious foods, companies that have a really high quality standard and don't allow a lot of these things that we're seeing in our food nowadays that are concerning to us, two of my favorite companies for shopping clean foods are Azure Standard and Thrive Life. I can meet a lot of my food storage needs just between these two companies. They're both really well known within our community, within the prepping community, so you've probably heard of them or maybe even shopped them yourself. If you haven't, I'm going to put our links for both of these companies down below this video so you can go check out their quality standards for yourself. Don't forget, one of the most important aspects of keeping a healthy pantry is going to be how you store these foods once you get them to maintain as much nutrition as possible. The biggest enemies of nutrients and indeed the longevity of your food are going to be heat, light, and oxygen. So if at all possible, store your food in a location that remains consistently cool and dry. Use airtight containers like mason jars, Mylar bags, and food grade buckets when you can. And use oxygen absorbers when it's appropriate. That's a topic for a whole nother video. And protect anything that's kept in a clear container like a mason jar from direct light. And then rotate, rotate, rotate. If you have these basic items as part of your food supply, all you have to do is add in some seasonings, some bouillon, and you have the means to turn these basic foods into many nutritious meals that will also be palate pleasing. Use your peanut butter to add to oatmeal or make a peanut sauce for meats, vegetables, pasta, or even a grain bowl. The lentils and coconut milk with some curry powder can make a coconut curry lentil stew. You could even throw in some spinach. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to throw away all the Spam, Vienna sausages, and cream of mushroom soup. No, no, no. I'm not getting rid of any of that. You do you, but I still have a place in my pantry and in my belly for those things. Those are all the things that we can use in combination with the healthier options to have even more meal options and make everything taste just a little bit better. Especially if you're in a position like so many of us, where some of these foods that I talked about today might be a little more foreign to you, and some of the other less healthy foods might be a little more familiar. Because a crisis or emergency is not a time to drastically alter our way of eating either. After all, that's a big reason why we prep, so that we don't have to do that. And familiar, comforting foods are going to be just as important as having nutritious superfoods. So I hope if these healthier options are not something that you're used to eating, that you won't just add them to your long-term storage, but also add them to your rotation and look for ways to incorporate them into your cooking that your family will enjoy or can learn to enjoy. Like I mentioned, I have a few recipes that I do have videos on that I will leave down below in the description for just a couple of these things, but really the internet is a great source for all different sorts of recipes, and I'm sure you'll find something that will agree with your tastes. So that's my list of the 10 healthiest foods that you can add to your prepper pantry. What would you add to this list? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with someone who might need this information. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me your favorite healthy food emoji down in the comments or your favorite healthy activity emoji. And check out this playlist right up here next for some mind-blowing ways to ditch the processed foods and do it better from scratch. I'm Jamerrill with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.